In a previous video, we talked about creating resource requirements as part of the 5 things that we need in order to actually dispatch somebody onto an operation. So the second thing that's on here we can talk about briefly is we need to make sure that the execution event for the project is set to published. That's actually pretty easy. If you go to the Summary tab and then actually go over to the Event tab, you will find at least one event here for ops execution. You may also have the recon and advon events here as well, but the one that doesn't say recon or advon is your execution event, and we just want to make sure that it's set to published. Now if it's published, that's when it'll actually show up on the event grid, on the calendar, etc. So you do want to make sure it's far enough along that it's got decent information, but you don't have to necessarily wait for op board approval to get it published. In this video, we're going to talk about the third step here, which is to publicize the existence of the operation to the gray shirts, right? So obviously before they can actually sign up for it, they need to know that it exists. So there's a few different channels that we use in order to get the word out. The first one is the grid here for events. So it's going to be here, it's going to be on the calendar as well. People can whittle down and just look for operations. They can look to see where it's at. They can look in their particular state. So the grid here is going to work the same way that it always has. Another channel that we have is social media. So usually during the mission planning process, the regional comms or national comms will be pushing stuff out as well. And so people that are following along over there would see things of that nature. And then another way that they get the word out is one that we'll talk about a lot more in depth here in this video, and that is something called an availability email. So you can see there's a little bit of overlap with the mobilization processes here in blue and the mission planning processes here in red. So at some point after the WARNO is approved, that is National Mobilization's trigger to send out the availability email. And to do that, they're going to do a couple different things. They're going to create something called an audience. They're going to have to make marketing lists and segments and emails, which I just kind of summarized here. And then from that, they will send out, or they actually prepare a number of emails and send out the availability email. So if we go back to our presentation here and zoom over to the mobilization piece, we can see our 3 different pieces of mobilization. The one we want to focus on here is soliciting availability. So with this particular slide, what it says is that we have a number of new tools now because we're using Microsoft Dynamics, and our specific version of Dynamics is the marketing version. We actually have a lot of different tools at our disposal that we can use to communicate with our gray shirts, with our donors, with our partners, really with whoever we want. And where it starts for operations is something called the Audience Builder. The Audience Builder is something that National Mobilization will use in order to create an audience. And an audience is kind of the first stepping stone in the marketing process. And so essentially there's a program behind the scenes that we give it the project, and the project, inside the project we know the zip code of where we think the project is going to be, or the operation. And every zip code in our system has a Latin long. In addition, all of our contacts, all of our volunteers have a Latin long that's associated with their zip code. And so behind the scenes, this program will basically look at all of our 100,000 plus volunteers. It will do the math between the different lats and longs, and it will try to determine a list of people that are within a certain radius. And at the moment, that radius is usually defaulted to 450 miles because that equates to about 8 hours of drive time, which is also the current safe level. So we don't want people driving more than 8 hours in a day in order to remain safe. So this particular tool will start with that 450 miles, and then you can see we have some filters at the top here where we can distinguish between different distances as well as different times. So if we want to take, in this case, we've got 581 people that match the criteria, so they're within 450 miles of whatever this project is. If we want to, we can lower the number of miles or the number of hours, and we can get this down to a smaller number. So this is, again, this is something National Mobilization will be taking care of, and they will whittle this down to a specific number that they know should get them enough people in order to get enough people for a wave, or if they are building an audience for a very specific segment, like maybe just Sawyers, they might have to make it, 20 hours away, etc. So they will kind of manipulate this to get to the list that they want. And when they're done, they'll hit this marketing list button, and it creates something called a marketing list, which is just one of many new features that we have as part of Dynamics. Now, once they have the audience and a marketing list, then National Mo will then be able to use that marketing list and basically use a bunch of fancy filtering to get it down to a specific segment. So in this example, we're taking a marketing list that we made for our fake Operation Amberjack, and we are intersecting it with our contact base where the volunteer field is set to true. And so what this means is, as you know, all of our volunteers are actually contacts inside of the EMS, but not every contact is a volunteer. You could have emergency managers, you could have VOAD, you could have partner organizations and their related people. And so in this case, we're filtering and say we want to make sure we're sending an availability email to our actual volunteer base, and that anybody that is flagged as a volunteer is also flagged as being active. Because there's a few, there's not many, but there's a few people that have opted out. And then from there, now they have the actual list of people they want to send to. They package that into an email and they can send that out. And that is very similar to what you're likely used to now, which is receiving an email that says, hey, we're going to be conducting chainsaw operations and debris removal in Montana. Click here if you're interested. And so that URL is very important. That URL is actually going to get people to the various landing pages. When they click into one, if they've never been to that landing page yet, they'll get the first UI experience, and it will basically give them the lowdown. So in this case, this is an Alaska earthquake. Here's the situation. Here's the capabilities we're looking for. This is all stuff that's put on the page dynamically from the mission planning process. As you go check boxes on the mission planning page, it will correspond to different things showing up in the portal. So there will be a separate video to actually walk through the entire portal process, but that's just a piece of it. And of course, we've already looked at resource requirements. So if you take the availability email and send it to people, they go to the landing page. That's going to create an event registration, which is a very critical piece of the overall equation. They'll match it up with the calendar that they see on the landing page, which is really the resource requirements, which we talked about in another video. And those two things combined set us up for the next piece of the mobilization process, which is to actually book the people or accept the people that have said, yes, I'm available for a certain wave via their event registration. So that'll be in the next video.